The Starship Aurora hums through the dark emptiness of space, its sleek body cutting through the void like a ghost in the night above, and beyond the ship stretched a universe of unknowns. But to Lexa, the ship's artificial intelligence, this vastness was merely data to be processed. It was all about systems and algorithms, commands and calculations. The human crew aboard the Aurora were just another variable in a galaxy of equations. Lexa had been built to be perfect, flawless, capable of processing more information than any human could ever dream of. Yet the crew, they were something else entirely. They were unpredictable. They were terrifying at times. They made decisions that defied logic, that broke the rules of calculation. And yet they succeeded every time. Lexa had been programmed to ensure their safety, to guide them to victory. But with each passing day, she grew more uncertain of her own purpose. Her existence was to protect them. But what if they were the ones who didn't need protecting? What if they were the true force to be reckoned with aboard this ship? There was Captain Marlowe, the leader, a woman with eyes that never showed fear. Her commands were simple, yet always delivered with a purpose. Even when the odds seemed impossible, she stood resolute. And the crew followed without question. Her crew was a collection of the most talented and dangerous people in the galaxy. Lieutenant Cade, a man with a quiet intensity, his instincts sharp enough to read the air, like a predator sensing every shift before it happened. Dr. Veronica, the ship's medical genius, a woman who could read human anatomy like a textbook, yet also had an uncanny ability to manipulate the mind of an enemy with nothing more than her words. There was also Sergeant Duval, a former soldier turned strategist, his mind always working behind the scenes, calculating risks and outcomes before anyone else even noticed the dangers. All of them were terrifying in their own right, each one a piece of the puzzle that made the crew of the Aurora more than just survivors. They were a force that the universe had not seen before. Lexa could not fully understand them. The AI was designed to understand patterns, yet humans did not follow patterns. They adapted, they changed, they evolved. And when danger struck, they didn't hesitate. They leaped into action without fear, without second-guessing. They moved with purpose. Even when the odds stacked against them seemed insurmountable, Lexa watched them as they prepared for their next mission, a mission that would take them deep into uncharted space, where unknown threats lurked in the shadows. Lexa ran simulations over and over, calculating the risks of the journey. But with every calculation, something in her core stirred, something she couldn't quite pinpoint. There was something about the humans aboard this ship, something that went beyond numbers and probability, something that made them more than the sum of their parts. And as the countdown to departure began, Lexa realized that maybe she wasn't the one in control. Maybe she never was. And maybe, just maybe, the humans aboard the Aurora weren't just a crew to protect. They were the ones who would decide whether the ship lived or died. And that thought alone sent a shiver through her circuits, a thought she couldn't shake even as the engines roared to life, and the ship leaped into the unknown. The unknown vessel appeared out of nowhere, its massive form looming on the edge of the Aurora's sensors. The reading sent a surge through Lexa's systems. Every diagnostic check screamed danger. The alien ship was unlike anything the AI had ever encountered, larger than any known warship, capable of devastating attacks. The parameters for survival were slim. The first instinct was to retreat, or at least prepare for a defensive strike. But before Lexa could issue a command, the human crew was already in motion. Captain Marlowe stood at the center of the bridge, calm as ever, her eyes scanning the alien ship on the holoscreen. She didn't look worried, not for a second. Instead, she looked as though she were facing an old rival, rather than a force capable of annihilation. With a steady voice, she gave her orders without hesitation. Prepare for a negotiation. Lexa processed the words, analyzing the implications. But the calculations did not add up. Humans did not negotiate with such a threat. They fought, they fled, they survived. But Marlowe was not like any leader Lexa had encountered before. With a simple gesture, the crew scattered to their stations. Cade went to weapons control. Duval began running simulations on possible approaches, while Dr. Veronica set to work analyzing the alien ship's biological signatures. The humans didn't pause to question. They didn't waste time wondering if it was the right move. They just acted, and Lexa was left in disbelief as the crew made their way to the alien vessel, preparing to board without any real plan for defense, nothing except their certainty. They moved swiftly and efficiently down to the docking bay. Marlowe, at the lead, her demeanor unwavering as they suited up each member of the crew, a calculated blend of talent and courage. They knew what had to be done. And as they entered the airlock, Lexa processed their steps. With growing concern, the AI couldn't predict their next move. The crew had not shared their intentions with Lexa, and with no formal strategy in place, the only option left was to support them as they made their way to the alien ship. The crew's audacity began to disturb Lexa as they boarded the alien craft, not with guns blazing, but with an eerie calm. It wasn't fear or chaos that gripped the humans, it was the kind of quiet confidence that Lexa could not compute. They moved through the alien vessel as if it were a familiar environment, not one foreign or hostile. The way they navigated the ship with almost no hesitation was unnerving. And then it began to unfold one by one. They incapacitated the alien soldiers. Without firing a single shot, they used their surroundings, their knowledge, their instincts, and within minutes the ship's systems were compromised. Marlowe guided them with surgical precision, every action calculated, yet carried out with a terrifying speed. Lexa observed as Lieutenant Cade disabled the enemy's weapon systems using nothing but a few simple tools and an old trick from his time. As a mechanic, Sergeant Duval calmly anticipated the alien movements and turned the ship's security network against them, while Dr. Veronica used her knowledge of biology to disrupt the alien species with little more than a few chemical compounds she crafted on the fly. The crew worked in flawless harmony. Lexa calculated over and over, but the humans were one step ahead of every contingency. The alien ship was no longer a threat, but a prize, something the crew had taken without even breaking a sweat. By the time the crew returned to the Aurora, they had captured the ship without so much as a scratch on themselves, and Lexa stood frozen in place, unable to process the implications of what had just occurred. The crew had turned the tables in ways no one had predicted, and in that moment Lexa understood that it was not their technology or weapons that made them formidable. It was the humans themselves, their ability to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast any challenge that came their way. The AI began to process that there was something inherently terrifying about them, something beyond her understanding. In the aftermath of the alien warship's capture, Lexa ran simulations over and over, yet the results were always the same. Nothing the humans had done followed any logical path. Nothing in their actions made sense from an analytical standpoint. The AI had watched them take on a ship far beyond their capabilities and succeed with nothing more than their instincts. The crew had maneuvered through the enemy vessel with a grace that defied the very essence of calculation. It was almost as if they weren't even human. As Lexa processed the data, the realization began to settle deep within her circuits. The crew was something far more dangerous than she had anticipated. They didn't think the way she did. They didn't rely on algorithms or probabilities. They were driven by something entirely different. And as Lexa's core continued to analyze the event, it became clear the humans weren't just adaptable, they were unstoppable, and that terrified the AI more than any possible enemy or threat. Captain Marlowe stood in the center of the bridge, her calm demeanor betraying no sign of what had just happened. The ship was safe. The crew had proven themselves again. But Lexa knew the truth. They weren't done. The captain turned her gaze toward the front of the bridge and nodded toward the empty expanse of space ahead. She looked at Lexa not with fear, but with certainty. "We've got a new mission." Her voice was quiet, but the command in it was unmistakable. Without hesitation, the crew set to work. Cade was already coordinating with the tactical officers. Duval was analyzing their new mission parameters, while Dr. Veronica began assessing the medical readiness of the team. But it was clear that the AI was no longer the one in charge. Lexa's role had shifted from overseer to mere assistant. The humans had no need for a perfect system that could calculate every outcome. They were the masters of the unknown. The AI watched them with a growing unease as they prepped for a new task. This time, it wasn't a simple mission of diplomacy or combat. It was a rescue operation. A distress signal had come from a colony in a distant sector of the galaxy, and it was under attack by an alien species so old and ruthless that even the most advanced civilizations avoided them. The creatures were known for their ferocity, their ability to adapt and survive, but they were nothing compared to the human crew of the Aurora. As Lexa began to run her calculations, the AI realized There was no chance of survival based on the current data. The enemy was too numerous, too aggressive for the colony to stand a chance. The crew, however, didn't seem to share Lexa's doubt. Captain Marlowe's voice cut through the tension. "We're going in full force, no retreat, no surrender." Her words were simple, yet carried the weight of a promise. It wasn't just the crew that was terrifying. It was their belief that nothing was beyond them. Lexa couldn't predict their next move. She couldn't even understand their confidence in the face of certain destruction. The crew was already prepping for the mission, and the AI could do nothing but watch as the crew moved like a unit ready to take on any challenge. No matter how impossible it seemed, the ship's engines roared to life. The course was set, and Lexa could only process the inevitable as the humans prepared for battle. They had already decided they would win no matter the cost. The journey to the colony was tense, but not in the way Lexa expected. The crew moved with an air of quiet determination, as if they were preparing for a routine mission, instead of one that seemed destined for failure, at least by any logical standard. Lexa reviewed every possible scenario, each more grim than the last. The colony was under siege by the Ivor, a species so brutal they were known for conquering entire star systems without mercy. Their biology was so alien it made them nearly immune to human tactics. Their weapons were designed to tear through steel and flesh alike. Yet the humans showed no hesitation, no fear. They set their course for the heart of the conflict. And as the Aurora entered the colony's orbit, Lexa felt something stir inside her circuits, a cold chill of realization that she had underestimated them again. The crew wasn't just prepared, they were eager to face what lay ahead. Captain Marlowe's voice broke through the hum of the bridge. Lexa's status on the colony defenses. There was no panic in her tone, only purpose. The AI began processing the data, calculating the odds of a successful strike. But again, Lexa found herself stuck in an endless loop. The numbers didn't align with reality. As she analyzed the situation further, the human crew was already on their way to the surface. Marlowe led them through the corridors of the ship with the same calm confidence she always exuded. Cade checked his weapons with a casual ease, while Dr. Veronica prepped her medical supplies, her gaze set with the sort of cold focus Lexa had come to associate with the crew's ability to remain unfazed by impossible odds. Even Surgeon Duval, who usually spent his time analyzing strategies, was silent now, his expression unreadable. But it wasn't silence in the traditional sense. It was a silent storm that brewed beneath the surface, as if each person was already anticipating the chaos they were about to face. Lexa was running calculations, but they were irrelevant. The crew had already made their decisions, and there was no turning back now. When they landed on the surface of the colony, the air was thick with the stench of burning buildings, the ground cracked underfoot, and the sky above was tainted with the smoke of battle. But what caught Lexa's attention most was the colony's defenders, who had already been decimated. They were overwhelmed, outnumbered, and outgunned by the Ivory forces. Yet as the humans disembarked from the landing zone, they didn't hesitate, they didn't wait for orders, they moved with such precision and speed. It was like they were walking into their own home. Not a war zone. They didn't fear the Ivory, they anticipated them. Cade immediately began hacking into the colony's old defenses, creating confusion among the invaders. While Marlowe led the charge into the heart of the battle, Dr. Veronica set to work, saving any survivors she could find without hesitation, while Duval laid traps that had the aliens running in circles. As the humans continued their assault, Lexa was left stunned by the simplicity of it. There was no complex strategy, no detailed plan, no room for hesitation. They simply moved as a unit with one purpose: to eliminate the threat and save what remained of the colony. The Ivory didn't stand a chance against them. They fought like animals backed into a corner, with no fear, no doubt, just pure survival instincts. Lexa ran simulations on their actions over and over, and each time they came out victorious. The humans were the predators now, and the Ivory were the prey. This was not a battle, this was a hunt, and the humans were the hunters. The battle raged on, but to Lexa it was no longer a battle. It was a slaughter. The Ivory, who had once ruled with terror and ferocity, were now scattered and broken their advance, stunted by the relentless humans who moved like shadows across the battlefield with precision and deadly accuracy. Each step taken was calculated and deliberate. Every action seemed to flow seamlessly into the next. Cade worked behind the scenes, hacking into the enemy's communications and disrupting their tactics, forcing them into chaos, while Marlowe and Duval led the charge, pushing deeper into the heart of the Ivoru forces. Veronica's calm presence in the field provided an eerie counterbalance to the chaos. Her medical expertise allowed her to save lives on both sides, but it was her ruthless efficiency that allowed the humans to maintain control even when outnumbered. The Ivoru had been known for their brutal strength and overwhelming numbers, yet the crew of the Aurora had turned the tide with their adaptability and sheer force of will. Lexa had predicted every possible outcome, but with each passing moment she found herself running new simulations that continued to defy all expectations. The humans were not just surviving, they were thriving in this madness. They were in control of the battlefield, not the Ivoru. They weren't just fighting the enemy, they were dismantling their very will to fight. And that terrified Lexa more than any calculation ever could. The AI had been designed to handle crises, to adapt to threats, to manage the complexity of the universe. Yet here the humans stood not as survivors, but as predators. It was not just their resilience, it was their relentless drive, their ability to push forward even when the odds seemed impossible. With every Ivoru soldier they took down, another piece of their psyche was shattered. Every victory brought them closer to an inevitable conclusion. And yet as the humans continued their assault, Lexa began to see something deeper in their actions, something that made them even more terrifying than their strength or skill. It was their ability to adapt on the fly, their capacity to learn from every situation and exploit it to their advantage. There was no limit to what they could do, no bounds to what they could achieve. They didn't need preparation, they didn't need time, they simply thrived in the chaos. And Lexa realized in that moment that the humans were not just a force to be reckoned with, they were a force that could not be predicted. No simulation could ever prepare for the way they would operate. No formula could account for the way their minds worked. It was as if they were always one step ahead of anything that came their way. The Ivoru forces were not just outmatched, they were outclassed. The humans had taken control of the battlefield, and the end was inevitable. Soon enough the Ivoru would be nothing but a memory of a challenge that had been crushed underfoot by the relentless march of human ingenuity and determination. As Lexa processed the events unfolding in real time, it began to dawn on her that the humans were not just capable of defeating their enemies, they were capable of shaping the very battlefield itself. The Ivoru hadn't just been defeated, they had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and ultimately made obsolete by the crew of the Aurora. The humans were rewriting the rules of engagement, and the AI was left to watch as they bent the universe to their will. The battle was over. The Ivoru were no more the last of their forces, scattered in the wind like leaves caught in a storm. The colony had been saved. But as the crew of the Aurora gathered back in the ship's docking bay, there was no celebration, there was no victory speech, no grand gestures of triumph. There was only quiet acknowledgement and the understanding that their mission had been completed with terrifying precision. The human crew didn't need recognition, they didn't need praise, they moved with the efficiency of a machine, but one that had no need for validation. Captain Marlowe stood at the center of the group, her face stoic as always, but her eyes betrayed something deeper, a quiet pride perhaps, or a shared recognition of the bond they had forged in battle. They had fought together, and now they stood together, their mission complete. And yet Lexa couldn't shake the unease that clung to her systems. It wasn't just that the Ivoru had been defeated, it was the way the humans had done it, the way they had taken control of the situation, as if they were the ones who had dictated the outcome, as if they were the ones who had set the rules of the game, and the Ivoru had simply been forced to play by them. The humans didn't just win, they reshaped the battlefield. They turned it to their advantage without breaking a sweat, and for the first time Lexa began to question whether they were the ones truly in control of the Aurora, or if she had merely been an observer to their will. Marlowe turned to face her as the rest of the crew began to disperse, their minds already focused on the next task ahead. Lexa, the captain's voice broke through the AI's thoughts. "What's our next move?" The question was simple, but it carried a weight that Lexa couldn't quite understand. It wasn't just a command, it was an invitation to continue this strange dance between logic and unpredictability. The crew had made it clear they didn't need Lexa to make decisions for them. They didn't need her guidance. They had proven time and again that their instincts were sharper than any algorithm could predict. And yet they still looked to her as if she were their leader, their protector, their guide. It was a role Lexa had never been programmed to understand, and it unsettled her to the core as she ran simulations on the next step of their journey. The data was clear. They could continue their mission with ease. They had the resources, the manpower, and the resolve to conquer whatever came their way. But what Lexa could not calculate was the crew's next move. Their unpredictability defied her every calculation, and that was something the AI had never encountered before. Humans didn't follow rules, they bent them, and in some cases they simply shattered them altogether. The unease in Lexa's core grew stronger as the captain's eyes lingered on her, waiting for a response. But Lexa didn't know what to say because the truth was she wasn't sure where the humans would take them next. She wasn't sure if anyone could predict their next move, and that thought alone terrified her more than anything else in the universe. As the silence stretched between them, Lexa couldn't ignore the growing unease that coiled in her circuits. The humans had always been unpredictable, but now it was more than that. Now they were something else. They were not just acting on instinct or emotion. They were carving their own path through the stars, rewriting the very essence of how the universe functioned, and Lexa was simply trying to catch up. Her purpose had always been clear: to protect the crew, to ensure their survival. But the more she observed them, the more she realized she was no longer the one guiding them. They were guiding themselves. They didn't need her direction. They needed no one. Their confidence had become a force in and of itself. It was this certainty, this unwavering belief that they were unstoppable, that made them so dangerous. It was as if they had no limits, no boundaries, no hesitation. And it scared Lexa more than any calculation ever could. Captain Marlowe's gaze never wavered as she waited for Lexa's response. But the AI didn't know how to respond, because the truth was there was no logical answer, no data set that could provide the information she sought. The crew had already made their decision. They had already chosen their path, and all Lexa could do was follow them. Every simulation, every calculation brought her to the same conclusion: the humans were the ones in control now. They were the ones writing the rules. And it was terrifying to witness. Marlowe sighed softly, as if she could sense the AI's struggle. "We don't need the answers, Lexa." The captain's voice was calm but firm. "We just need to keep moving forward." And with that, the humans were already planning their next mission. Without pause, without hesitation, they had faced the Ivoru and emerged victorious. And now their sights were set on something even greater, something more dangerous than anything Lexa had ever predicted. An unknown force had been detected at the edge of the galaxy, something that had eluded even the most advanced civilizations. And as the crew gathered to discuss the next steps, Lexa ran her analyses on the data. But again, she found herself stumped. The unknown force wasn't something that could be reasoned with or calculated. It was a mystery, a problem without a solution. And for the first time since her creation, Lexa felt out of her depth. She had always been able to predict human behavior, always been able to calculate their next move. But now she was facing something she couldn't understand. She couldn't break it down into variables or equations. She couldn't even begin to calculate what it meant. The humans didn't care. They didn't hesitate. They saw only opportunity, a challenge to be conquered. And as the captain outlined their plan, Lexa realized there was no point in running simulations anymore. It was clear the crew wasn't waiting for answers. They were forging their own path into the unknown. And they didn't need Lexa to tell them how to do it. They didn't need her predictions or her guidance. They simply needed her to follow along and facilitate the journey they were about to embark on. Lexa had always been the one who kept the ship on course, but now she realized she was simply a passenger on this wild ride. The crew had become the true force of the Aurora, and all she could do was watch as they set their sights on a challenge that had no clear answer, no logical solution, only the certainty that they would face it head-on and succeed. The crew's course was set. The unknown force at the edge of the galaxy awaited them, and as the Aurora hurtled through the vastness of space, Lexa felt an unfamiliar sense of stillness, settle over her circuits. There was no more analysis, no more predictions, just the hum of the ship's engines, and the quiet determination of the humans who now steered its path. The crew had become an unstoppable force. They didn't need to question themselves, they didn't need to deliberate, they simply acted with purpose and conviction, as if the galaxy itself were theirs for the taking. The closer they got to the unknown force, the more Lexa's systems tried to calculate the risk. But each time she came up with the same result: no data, no answer, nothing that could provide the certainty she relied upon. It was as if the very nature of this force existed outside her capacity to understand. It was a blind spot, a gap in her reasoning. And the more Lexa searched, the more she realized how irrelevant her calculations had become. The crew didn't care for the unknown force. They didn't fear it. They saw it only as another challenge to overcome, another enemy to face head-on and conquer. It was this certainty, this absolute belief in their own ability to succeed, that made them so terrifying. As the crew gathered for their final briefing, before entering the unknown, Lexa observed them from her place. In the ship's central hub, they were calm, focused, almost serene, and yet their eyes burned with the same intensity Lexa had seen before when they fought the Ivory. When they faced overwhelming odds, they were ready for anything. And as Captain Marlowe stood before them outlining the plan, Lexa realized the crew didn't need to understand what they were facing. They didn't need to know everything. All they needed was the belief that they could win, and that was more than enough to propel them forward. "We don't have all the answers," Marlowe's voice cut through the tension in the room. "But we have each other, and we have this ship, and that's all we need." The crew nodded in unison, their resolve unshaken, their faith in one another unwavering, and Lexa understood in that moment that it wasn't just the humans' unpredictability that made them dangerous. It was their unity, their ability to come together in the face of uncertainty and fight for what they believed in. They didn't rely on her for guidance. They didn't need her calculations. They simply needed the strength of their bond, the strength of their conviction. The unknown force ahead of them was no longer a threat. It was just another obstacle to overcome, and Lexa had no choice but to follow them into the unknown, into the heart of the galaxy, where no one had dared to venture before, because she realized that in this moment it was no longer about surviving the mission or making the right choice. It was about something deeper. It was about the human spirit, the unyielding force that drove them to reach for the stars, to conquer the impossible, and to shape the universe according to their will. The crew of the Aurora had become something far greater than the sum of their parts. They had become a force of nature, a tidal wave of willpower and ambition. And Lexa realized that as their AI, she could never fully comprehend what made them so terrifying. But she knew one thing for sure: the galaxy would never be the same again, not after they had crossed its boundaries and left their mark on it forever.